I would categorize myself as a social media denier because I never play to the broader audience. I need to find and concentrate my effort, all of my effort, and I have precious little effort to go around. I have to focus on those people who are going to write the checks. So those are the people I need to reach. I do not reach them through social media.
Welcome to The Creative Endeavor, a podcast that dives into the journey of the artist's life. Here on the podcast, we celebrate the boundless creative pursuit, exploring how art expands horizons and fuels the soul. A testament to pushing boundaries, challenging limits, and striving for excellence in the artistic realm. Join us as we uncover the triumphs and risks of the creative path, sharing inspiring stories of artists who dare to dream and persevere. The Creative Endeavor is your podcast guide to embracing the beauty of artistic expression and living a life filled with passion and purpose. Welcome. My name's Andrew Tischler, and it is such a pleasure to have your company here in the studio once again. Thank you so much for joining me. Man, have I got a treat for you here in this episode. Back by popular demand, I can't tell you how many emails, comments, and messages I've received about this dude. I'm talking once again to my father, Tom Tischler. Now, in the previous episodes of the podcast that featured Dad, we talked a lot about his journey and how he started and what were those initial sparks of inspiration that led him down the path of being a full-time sculptor. My father's preferred medium is bronze, and he uses the lost wax process. So I wanted to cover some different territory here in this episode and ask him about some of the things that are going on today and some of the projects that he's currently working on. And we happened to catch Tom at a very interesting point in his career where he's exploring some different ways and methods of producing some of the best bronze sculpture that I've ever seen. Now, maybe I'm a little biased, I'll give you that, because it's Dad, but I tell you, he creates some really inspiring work. When I was a kid, I used to boast and brag about, my dad made a mammoth. He actually made a life-size bronze statue of a mammoth, would you believe? It's at the Dallas Museum of Natural History. Go ahead and Google that. You'll find several images of this spectacular sculpture. Well, he's just gone and done it again, but not only that, triple that effort, just about. He's got a life-size male mammoth trumpeting into the air and a full-size female mammoth with her calf, and it's a spectacular sculpture welcoming people to a museum. It's on display right now at the Mayborn Museum in Texas. It's absolutely incredible. So I wanted to ask him about this new direction and some of the things that he's using to produce these incredible sculptures. And of course, this led into some interesting conversation on his business philosophy, how he does what he does, not just from an artistic standpoint, but what's he thinking about in terms of his approach to business and how he continues to thrive as an artist. And then I wanted to ask him specifically about art marketing. How do we find our niche as an artist? My father's carved out a very interesting niche that has kept him employed for decades, and he continues to thrive within this incredibly specialized, tiny little niche. What was he thinking? How did he come about this as a way of creating a thriving art business? And what are some of the things that we can learn as artists following this example? I certainly have learned a lot from this approach and apply it every day to my business. Now, before we jump into this podcast, I just want to take a quick minute and give a huge shout out and thank you to this episode's sponsor, Rosemary & Co. Brushes. Rosemary & Co. have been making the finest quality artist brushes for over 40 years. It's all I use here in the studio. My favorite happens to be the Tisch Dagger, not just because my name's on it, but because it's just an awesome brush to use. I can get a nice broad sweeping stroke, great for some textured effects or loose brushwork, as well as some relatively fine lines. And then when I just wiggle that point just so, I can create some really random marks for some nice painterly effect. Not only do they make great oil painting brushes, but they also make a wide range of acrylic brushes and watercolor brushes as well. These are by far the finest quality brushes I have ever used. And I'm not just saying that. I was using them long before Rosemary & Co. agreed to sponsor this podcast. It's such a pleasure to have them on board. Now, if you want to get your hands on these amazing brushes, then all you have to do is click that link in the description that accompanies this podcast and check them out. Again, they are absolutely amazing brushes and are such good value for money when you consider the quality. So check them out or visit www.rosemaryandco.com. And just a quick mention that you are currently listening to the audio version of this podcast. This episode of The Creative Endeavor is going to have a heck of a lot of visuals to go along with the video version, and that can only be found at Tisch Academy. If you want to see the video version of the podcast right now, you can get that for only $5 a month. And that is available at tisch.academy, TISCH.academy. So check that out if you want to see the official video version of the podcast or hundreds of hours of painting content, more painting content than you could shake a brush at. There is a huge library on the Academy of painting demonstrations, as well as some art business videos, critique videos, and live streams. That's all available on Tisch Academy. And if you want to see me paint here live in the studio, I go live about every week here for a couple of hours from the studio where I'm working on all kinds of different stuff. So if that sounds like something cool that you'd be getting into, then check it out by visiting tisch.academy. You can also find the video version of this podcast. All right. I can't wait to share this episode with you. This was a lot of fun. Here he is. This is my father, Tom Tischler, in The Creative Endeavor. Tom Tischler, welcome back to the Creative Endeavor podcast. How are you?
I'm doing great. What took you so long to invite me back?
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. I deserve that. Look, it's wonderful to have you back. I got to say, Dad, you are heavily requested. There's been a lot of people saying, "Oh, get your dad back on. Get your dad back on." That podcast was so much fun, and so many people got such a insight into you, into your history, how you began your art journey. And so I just want to direct people back to that conversation to get your backstory. We're going to cover some other things in this podcast, and every time we talk, the hours tend to go by without me really noticing them. We've always got a lot of ground to cover, you and I, which is fun. And so I'm hoping that we can talk about some of this fun stuff. But there was something that came up in my mind. I was thinking about a really cool place to launch this conversation with you. And I'm reminded about some of these conversations that we used to have when I was kind of in high school, 16, 17 years old. I always remember on a Saturday or Sunday morning, we would be talking, and it would be about art and life and philosophy and all these different things. But I remember specifically these conversations about art. And this one conversation that we had was about what makes great art. And I got asked this recently, but I want to throw that question back to you again and just kind of thinking about and reminiscing some of these conversations that impacted me so much as a young man. Dad, what do you think makes great art?
Well, now wait a minute. How many years ago was that conversation?
Oh, dude, well over 20.
Well, then how the hell am I supposed to remember that? Okay, what makes great art? Let's just see if we can dredge it up out of the depths.
Let's do it.
All right. Let's define art to begin with.
Mhm.
Art is communication, non-verbal communication. Now, I'm talking graphic art here, painting, drawing, sculpture, stuff like that. I'm not talking literature or dance or music. That's also art in its own definition. But that's not what we're talking. We're talking about graphic art here. So we're going to just tie this down. It's flat art and 3D art sculpture. So, and I want to be sure about that people don't misinterpret the terms that I choose, but I only have limited number of terms to choose, and they've all been used before, and that's not necessarily the way I'm using them now. So what is art? Art is communication. It's nonverbal communication, and it's going to occur twice. The artist is not there to communicate with, it's indirect communication because the artist is not present to communicate with the viewer. And the communication has to occur twice. The first time is between the artist and the art. And then it occurs again when the viewer views the art, and the artist may be long gone. But the viewer will interpret what they see in terms of their own personal life experiences. That's all they can do. They may not even speak the same language. If much time has gone past, we don't belong to the same culture. We look back at any of the early great artists, Michelangelo, Da Vinci, move on, Rubens, whatever period you want to look at, we don't belong to that culture any longer. So it's difficult for us to know exactly what they were thinking, why they were thinking it, but the art still speaks to us, but it speaks to us in our own language. So art is communication, and that means to be art, it has to communicate something. And that one of my favorite philosophers, Willie Nelson, I'll put it this way. He said, you can't say nothing if you ain't got nothing to say. So if you want to be an artist, you have to have something to say. All right. Now the question is, how well can you say this? How clearly can you communicate this to others non-verbally with using just your medium? Not the artist's statement. The artist, if you require an explanation, an introduction, if the viewer requires guidance in interpreting what you meant, you're not doing a very good job communicating through your medium.
Oh.
So communication is central to this concept.
Mm-hmm.
All right. People say, well, you can't really define art that way because art is subjective. It's not objective. It's about feelings. It's not about things that can be measured. And I will tell you, I believe that if you cannot evaluate and quantify the various aspects of your art that are important, you're just not trying hard enough. It can be done. So, in looking for a piece of good art, it has to reach out and engage the viewer. It has to be interesting, it has to get their attention. And once that you get their attention and you deliver the message, the question is that message memorable? Is that something they're going to keep in their mind, or 15 minutes later, they don't even remember what they looked at in the art gallery? Is it going to really make a difference? Is it something important enough to say, can you get that message across? Will it stay with them? That's a measurement. Now, you may not be able to measure it in millimeters or in hours or whatever, but it's a measurement. It's either memorable or it's not. All right. Now we move on to the physical aspects of the painting, and there are certain characteristics every painting has within its composition. And that might be color coordination. It might be tonal contrast. It might be the illusion of depth perception, perspective. It might be the position of various elements in relationship to each other. There is a whole list of these, which I believe you've touched on all of them, that you and I sat down and identified 20 something years ago.
Yep. Absolutely.
So those are some of the things that make art great.
Mm-hmm.
Now, art has to have at least one of those to be art. If it has none of those, then it's non-art.
Okay.
Just doing something because it's shocking does not make it art. Duchamp said, and I paraphrase here, only the artist can say that something is or isn't art. What he really meant, this was a comment about the Art Academy at that time. What he was really saying is, those members of the Academy, do not get to say what is and isn't art. That is a personal thing between the artist and their art and the viewer. And the Academy has nothing to do with it. That's the political statement he was making with his famous urinal.
Can I just jump in here? I remember that documentary series. Some stuff it won't leave me. The guy's name was Matthew Collins. This is modern art, and we watched that together in 1999, and a lot of that, I was just sitting there watching this show, just with my jaw open, just going, what crap people can get away with is insane. And then I saw the interview with Duchamp there, and again I can't remember exactly what he said, but he was saying something about producing this work as a mockery to discredit what art had become. He was disillusioned with the direction it was going, and he's like, well, here now, and I can't quite remember the context. I think you remember a little better than I do, but
I don't remember the documentary.
this is modern art with the English guy, and he was
Yeah, I
going
remember
for,
the English guy, but I can't remember that particular documentary.
yeah, it was a
And
whole
it may have been
series.
that I had already read enough about Duchamp that it
We're,
wasn't new and I just didn't plug it in.
yeah, yeah, fair enough. Yeah,
Okay, so I've got a photographic memory, but some stuff I just have to put in the recycle bin.
you got to save hard drive space.
That's it. I've only got a limited amount. I've used mine up long ago.
Fair enough, Dad. Fair enough. But I mean, okay. Okay, so back to what you were saying, because this is really interesting. So you're saying it has to have at least one of these things. Can we just again touch on those things that it has to have in order to qualify as art? Are you speaking about that visual nature? It has to have something. It has to demonstrate
it is.
something in order for it to qualify.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
It's those special things. The most important about them is that it has to be memorable. It has to speak to the viewer. It has to
Hmm.
engage them. It
Hmm.
has to have, it has to bring insight into the subject.
Hmm.
It has to provide new information. If it's the same old stuff, well, hasn't somebody else already said that a lot of times? So there's a degree of how original or unique is the piece. And of course, anyone would say there's nothing new under the sun, there's nothing at all. And so the artist there's hardly anything you can paint that somebody hasn't painted something similar in the past,
Hmm.
something similar, more or less.
Hmm.
So the question is, what are you bringing to it new? What combinations of these factors have you brought together that make this statement, whatever you decide the statement is? No one gets to decide the statement except you, for you, the artist. And remember that no one gets to make the statement about what it is and what it means for the viewer except the viewer. Notice this doesn't leave any space for art critics.
Mm.
They are useless and should be stamped from the face of the earth.
Careful, Dad. They might be
Oh,
listening to
excuse
the
me.
podcast.
Excuse me. Just got a little
Goodness me.
carried away with it there.
All right.
Um,
You're
I'm not.
talking metaphorically. You're talking, um, you know, not literally. You're hoping they find other employment somewhere else.
Yes. Well,
Okay.
but I'm not pleased with their general behavior over the years. Not that they ever critique me. They rarely do.
Well, you
They're
got one.
always sorry they did.
Well, hang on a second. I remember I remember a story you told me, many years
That's
ago, but I
probably
think
one of these. They're sorry
I,
they did.
I think it's I think I'd love to hear it again. But the story about the that critic that came to your unveiling of the, I think it was a sea turtles, wasn't it? And
I
or
think
no,
it
no,
was Indian
yes. Yeah, it was the Indian catching the eagle. The Indian,
aspiration to
beautiful.
fly.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful sculpture, Dad. Yeah, I'll have Jim cut that in here in the video version of the podcast so people can see it. Yeah, beautiful sculpture. Love that. Where is the Indian catching the eagle? What state is that in?
It's in the at the Shield Museum of Gastonia, North Carolina.
Awesome. So you had an art critic come and give you a write-up on this.
Well, I didn't even, they didn't speak to me. They didn't speak to the director. They just came, looked around, went back and knew everything. So then they wrote it up. And they pointed out that in one of the things he pointed out in his article that sort of got up my nose a little bit was he said that the director had said that my work was in the vein of Michelangelo's work.
Mhm.
He wasn't comparing me to Michelangelo. What he was saying is my work was human form and hyper realistic.
Mhm. Mhm.
It was anatomically accurate,
Mhm.
and so that's what the director meant to say there. That's what he was trying to say, and this guy uh, gave lambasted the director for implying that I was as good as Michelangelo. Nobody said such a thing.
Mm.
And another thing he pointed out was that this was an Indian catching an eagle and advertised in Playboy magazine was a small ceramic or plastic bronze sculpture
Mhm.
for sale. That only lasted a while before that company went out of business,
Right.
of an Indian catching an eagle. The subject was the same, Indian catching eagle. That's a pretty common theme if you're looking at Indian lore.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's where the similarity stopped. But he wanted to suggest that I had copied that out of Playboy magazine. So my reply to him inferred that I was quite sure that he was only reading Playboy magazine for the intellectual content. So I mean that just sort of is today. I don't even respond. I
Okay.
don't react.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have so little use for these people.
Okay.
They're not worth 2 minutes.
Sorry I brought it up. But I mean, it's
But you
I
can
yeah.
always cut it.
No, 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 not at all. No, I'm keeping it in there. I just I remember that, and I remember I don't know. A lot of my point of view has been formed by a lot of these experiences that you've had, which is quite interesting. And one thing that I appreciate about the direction that you've had in your career, is your ability to self-represent and just roll up your sleeves, get the job done, get into it, work hard, and how you've been able to make this work for yourself. There seems to be a culture, when we're talking about art, what makes great art, we were mentioning there modern art as well. There seems to be this culture that goes along with, let's call it, academia, which, you've never broken into or been able to or ever tried to. And, I've never really aspired to be part of that world either. And so when people are asking, and talking about the art world, my response is always, which one are you talking about? There's many different art worlds. There's many different markets out there. So one thing I appreciate about the way you've done it is your ability to create your own kind of direction, your own business, even your own business philosophy, your own approach, doing it your way without really having to mix it up with galleries and critics and being accepted by an establishment. And so maybe you can speak to that a little bit because I think it's interesting what's opening up now for artists out there in terms of opportunities. But there are still some who have this idea that there's this path that is okay. I'm going to go to school. I'm going to go to university. I'm going to get accepted into a gallery. I'm going to have exhibitions. I'm going to get written up in the paper. Blah blah blah, and then I can retire one day. That seems to be something you can do that, but there seems to be so many different directions you can take now. Um, I know there's a question somewhere in there, Dad. I've talked about a few things there, but I don't know. You want to riff on any of those points?
Well, I'll just rip on that. I think you've got the lid off of too many cans of worms.
Okay.
So I think we need to ask one question at a time. You've already asked, I don't know how many.
A
I
dozen.
think we didn't finish up with what makes great art.
Let's
So
finish
I'm
there,
going to go
Dad.
back and pick that up.
Let's finish that. Okay.
All
So
right.
so so
So
okay.
you
So
have
well,
a
hang on, hang
number.
on, hang on, hang on. Okay. Okay. Let's bring it back. Let's finish off that topic then, Dad, on what you think makes great art.
Right. So there are various aspects that you should be aware of and you can measure.
Mhm.
Composition, the aesthetic qualities, the message, the impact, all of these things. You write them down, make a list out of them. You have a list somewhere. This
Oh
is
yeah,
not
sure.
something I carry around and go over in my head frequently.
Yeah, we talk about it often on the Academy.
No, I mean not in these terms.
Hmm.
We
Hmm.
haven't been through this particular conversation in
Hmm.
years.
Hmm.
Uh, but to me, to be art, you have to have at least one of those that you do that you that's present and you can detect.
Hmm.
And one of those things has got to be to make great art. One of the things that you've got to have is you've got to demonstrate your skill with your chosen medium.
Hmm.
You've got to demonstrate that you have extreme insight into the subject and knowledge of the subject. You know whereof you speak. You're not just making this stuff up.
Hmm.
You have something to say and you say it clearly and you say it exceptionally well
Hmm.
artistically with whatever medium is your medium. And that would go for literature or music, for example. Those would fit because those are such generic statements. So and so you look at the at what the artist is saying and do they speak about this subject with actual knowledge? Is there some reason we should listen to this? You should not have to check on any history. You look at paintings of horses. I don't know
Hmm.
where that how that came to mind. Um, you look at paintings of horses and you say that that feels good. This guy's seen a horse or two.
Hmm.
That's just the way it looks. If that's what you're trying to say. Now, if you're trying to uh, depict horses as demonic evil spirits, well, then that painting is not going to get that message across. That's a different message. You have to decide what you're going to get across, and then your viewer will have to translate out whatever they determine it is. The question is can you say it in such a way that a viewer who is not the same age, maybe not from the same culture, maybe doesn't speak the same language, would come away with the message you wanted? And if they can't come away with the message you wanted, at least they come away with a message.
Okay.
Makes them think. It makes them think. So now let me just wind this up in a couple of sentences. To be art at all, you have to be able to tick one of those boxes. You demonstrated this aspect of art. To be good art, you need more than one. To be better art, the more of those boxes you tick, the better the art is. To be great art, you have to tick all the boxes. End of story.
Okay.
Now let's see. What was question number 2?
No, it makes sense. I think about this a lot in terms of the message and the meaning behind it, and I totally dig what you're saying about the artist statement as well. Like, I don't want to give one. I don't really offer one. I might say where a place is. I might explain a little bit about how the piece came together, but I don't really want to direct to the viewer. I want the painting to speak for itself. And when I think about that, like, I don't think my paintings are deep at all. Like, and I actually try to avoid depths with my work. I want it to be as simple as possible, that there's just an immediate recognition and appreciation for the subject. That's it.
Well, I guess when you become sophisticated enough to reach over and pick up those other things, you can consider your work great.
Wow.
Don't limit yourself.
No, I'm not. I'm following.
Be aware that what I was trying to tell you 20 something years ago
Yeah.
is be aware of all of these aspects, write them down, and make damn sure your artwork ticks every box on the list.
No, hang on, hang on, hang on. No, just to make sure we're not talking across each other here. What I'm saying is that I am avoiding things that are. I try to avoid anything that makes too much of a statement. What inspires me, and I had a profound experience in the landscape, and you were there. Oh, I remember this. I remember it vividly. Where it was and again, you remember it was the best cup of coffee I ever had, right? And it was South Rim, Grand Canyon. We were sitting there at dawn. We were waiting for that dawn light to come up. And I know you remember this moment, but the feeling that I had looking at that landscape, it's almost a profound spiritual experience. You can't really put it into words, but you're witnessing something awe-inspiring and powerful. That it's almost like a chase, like a surfer chasing that perfect wave. You're trying to capture something that is elusive. It's a feeling, but it's if for me, it's totally a visual thing. You get triggered in all these ways, and to try and distill that onto the canvas. I don't know if I can say anything about these moments and these scenes, but apart from, hey, this is awesome. Check this out. This is an incredible moment. Look at the way the light strikes this mountain, this cliff, or look at this water. That's it. I don't have anything profound to say beyond that. Maybe it's not great art that I'm producing, but I sure am having a good time.
But you said something about what you were interested in and the
Yes.
feeling that the subject gave you.
Yes.
That's enough.
Okay.
That's a statement. It doesn't have to make a statement about anything political, anything topical, anything popular at the moment. That's not necessarily of any value at all.
Right.
You made a statement about your relationship to the landscape, to the climate, to the weather, to that morning. Even, I can just look at that painting and I can taste that bad coffee. But I was there.
Yep. Yeah.
The viewer won't be.
Mm.
The viewer will choose to buy that painting or a print of that painting or whatever because it's communicating very much the same thing to the viewer,
Hmm.
very much the same thing, but it falls under the heading of someplace they would rather be.
Mm. Mm. Yep.
So just, the beauty of nature is enough of a statement
Mhm.
that it's all right. I know that's not popular academically, and I don't care.
Whatever. Yeah. Yeah. Let's change gears here.
Do it.
Um, I I really I got a kick out of one of your latest sculptures. I remember this so well as a young boy when you did the life size mammoth for what was it, the Dallas Museum of Natural History,
That's right.
and that was like epic. It's like, oh, my daddy made a mammoth, like a freaking mammoth, dude. And I still remember climbing on the tusks of that thing. I remember the wax original. I remember the wooden armature that you built in the studio. I remember the big studio that you had next door to the daycare where I was in. And so, fond memories for me. You just recently topped that effort by more than double. Tell us about one of your latest sculptures, the mammoths.
Well, Baylor University at Waco, Texas, has a natural history museum, the Mayburn Museum, and they commissioned a trio of life-size Columbian mammoths. Now, that's the same species of mammoth that I did 30, 35 years ago for the Dallas Museum of Natural History. And I would suggest that that is the very next natural history museum south of Dallas. They also got a mammoth, but 35 years later. But this time they bought three mammoths.
Beautiful. How did this piece come to be? Can you run us through the process? Because looking at a bronze sculpture at this scale, like it just boggles the mind, Dad. Like how do you even start this process? Can you take us through like your consultation process all the way up until this install date? What's it take? What's it take to do something like this?
Let me start with the first mammoth
Yeah.
and compare the two because things have changed so drastically. Uh, First, I know about elephants, and I've been a friend of that mammoth for since I was a small child. Very, very interested and excited, not just in the mammoth, but all prehistoric stuff. Like every other kid, interested in dinosaurs. Dinosaurs is going to reach out. I know mammoths are not dinosaurs, but hey, they're big extinct animals. They're dinosaurs. So I'm interested in all that stuff. I have a lot of personal experience with elephants and mostly African, but Asian to a lesser extent. So I knew about my mammoths when 30 years ago, the Dallas Museum wanted a mammoth.
Mhm.
So I had a good place to start. But I went back and studied the subject again. Now, this always holds. Get a commission, you go back, don't think for a minute you know everything about the subject. You don't. Look and see what new has been done, what you can read, what you can learn, and then incorporate that into your artistic composition. So at that time, it was very conventional lost wax bronze. And that meant after I designed the piece and did multiple small scale study models, I then had to enlarge the piece. That process is called pointing up. I had to enlarge the piece accurately to life size. Then I sculpted that. In the case of the Dallas Mammoth, it was pure wax. Later, I changed materials. Then I had to build a mold over my original, and that mold was then shipped to the foundry. The foundry cast wax into the mold. That was covered with a fireproof material and put in the furnace, and the wax burned out, melted away, lost. That's where the term lost wax bronze casting comes from, because at that point, the wax is lost.
Mm-hmm.
So it's burned up. And so that was very hands-on. I had that mammoth a year in the studio. We were nearly a year in contract and design collaboration and negotiation. Then it was a year in the studio and a year in the foundry. Tied that foundry up for a year.
Mm-hmm.
It was cast in 28 pieces. We designed, I say we, owner of the foundry, John Casson, and I designed every piece of equipment ourselves and hand built it.
Wow.
And cast that mammoth in 28 pieces, and we never lost a casting.
Amazing.
So that's the way it was 35 years ago. So this new mammoth is a product of COVID, of the
Interesting.
pandemic.
Okay.
So the world starts to go into lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just about the time the initial inquiry of would I be interested in doing the mammoth came in. And this was an inquiry, not a contract, not saying we want you to do it. Would you do it? And if you did, what would that cost? And please tell us sometime in the next 3 months what that would cost.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I looked at it and I really didn't have a whole lot of other stuff on the go, and the world seemed to be shutting down around me. I'm fairly recluse here in the rainforest in far north Queensland.
Mm-hmm.
The day I got that email, I said, this is my project. This project was meant for me. And I just started the project. I didn't have a contract.
Mm-hmm.
I started not very expensive. I started by reevaluating what I knew about mammoths, what new had been learned and published. And I started reading and sketching and trying to decide what my mammoth would look like, what I wanted to say with the mammoth, what my key messages would be. And I wrote those messages down. Now I have a list of things I want to say. This is back to this art as communication.
Mm-hmm.
And so I drew that up, and then I immediately started in on scale models. And I did plastiline, which is, or plasticine, which is oil-based modeling clay.
Mm-hmm.
And I have that original here on this back shelf, and I'm going to pull, excuse me for bobbling the computer.
Yeah.
I'll pull this back and
Let me just take a quick moment. Let me take a quick moment, let people know that there is a video version of the podcast that's only available on Tish Academy. And then you'd be able to see this shelf that's behind my father as he's talking here. We can see a beautiful view here of the maquettes, but I also have my editor, Jim, cut in some images of these maquettes into the video podcast. Yeah, you got them. You're on them. That's beautiful.
All right.
That's it.
So that's the original. They're about 8 or 10 inches tall, and So those were my original first drafts. So that the museum, because they have a process for spending big, it's a big purchase.
Sure.
They asked for the price, and they said, could your price be accompanied by 3 pencil sketches indicating what your concept is? And I wrote back to them and said, I hope it's okay. I am a sculptor, not a flat artist. Would it be okay if I did a 3D model and you could have 3 images of the model instead of me drawing a pencil sketch? And they said, yes, of course. Well, I'd
Perfect.
already done more pencil sketches than you could shake a stick with.
Mhm.
And I sketch every day. I
Mhm.
didn't say I couldn't. I said I'm a sculptor. I would prefer to present 3-dimensional work.
Yes.
Well, they looked at the 3-dimensional work and said, my goodness, that's exactly what we want.
Mm.
So I had the contract. I had
Awesome.
gone through most of the design process before I received the contract,
Awesome.
because I worked every day during the COVID lockdown on that. I focused on that instead of worrying about what was happening with the rest of the world, over which I have no control whatsoever.
Mhm.
I only can control what happens in my own studio.
Mm.
Have enough trouble with that.
Mhm. Mhm. Um,
Now,
yeah,
you did want to know about the process on this.
well, I do. I mean, just looking at the images of the install, it's insane. Like, and also there's one picture here. I want to show you this image here, Dad, because it tells us so much about the sculpture. I'm gonna share my screen with you, and this picture here of the male on the flatbed truck on its side. Can you see my screen? You see what I'm
Yes,
sharing with
yes,
you?
yeah.
Um, one might assume it's a solid bronze sculpture, but it's actually pretty thin. It's like a thin shell of bronze, a big bubble of bronze, if you will, right? There's very little about this that's solid. How thick is this sculpture overall? Like, what is the dimension on that bronze?
It's about 7 millimeters thick.
Wow.
So a smaller sculpture could have been a little bit small, a little bit thinner,
Hmm.
but this has so much weight. We needed the strength in the bronze wall, so 7 millimeters did it.
Right.
And so this piece weighs about between 6 and 8,000 pounds, which is
Mm,
3,000 kilos,
3 tons.
3 tons, 3 tons, yeah. And
Amazing.
so, and that's just one of the 3 pieces. Then you notice there that his tusk is cut off. That was
Hmm.
because the tusk stuck up so high that it was conflicting with low hanging power lines over the highway.
You don't want to grab one of those with a bronze tusk.
No, you do not.
Okay, yes. So I'd love to hear the process of this one. So the first, again, just to reiterate,
Okay.
the first one was a lost wax process. Again, like I remember you painstakingly carving the original out of wax, full size, full
Full
scale.
size.
And like so these some of these pictures of you standing next to that mammoth, it's like, it's insane. I remember that, man. I remember that. And but now this was a completely different process. So walk us through how this one started.
All right. Well, it started the same way. I
Mm,
studied, I sketched, and I
mhm.
built scale models to,
Right.
to demonstrate proof of concept to myself. The difference between this one and the previous traditional lost wax one, I did my scale models And then I originally pointed it up personally, took a year to build that mammoth life size and detail it. Huge physical effort, extremely expensive, took all of my time, all of my energy. I had to hire an industrial space as a studio.
Mhm.
The thing was 4 meters high at the shoulder. It's just huge. It took tons of wax and 50 sheets of plywood and a bundle of 4x2s and hundreds of pounds of brown craft paper to build the original mannequin, which I then coated with wax and carved all the detail in. Was a huge project.
Mhm.
This time started off the same way. I did my study, I did my sketches, I did my study models, many of them.
Mhm.
I'm going to bring to you here. I'll just turn around and get it.
Yeah.
I only have left a few of these. So this is the earlier small scale version,
Yeah.
and you see with my hands. And so these
Beautiful.
are only 75 millimeters. The male is 75 millimeters tall.
Mhm.
So this is part of the process of doing them at different scales.
Mhm.
And the amazing thing is that this is almost exactly the composition that we ended up with life size. It
That's
didn't
right.
change. And it's
That's right.
because I put so much effort into the drawings, the design. The drawings and the models are like the blueprints for a building.
Mhm.
They are not the building. They are the blueprints that tell someone else how to build it. In the case of the first mammoth, I was the one that had to tell myself how to build it.
Mhm.
So that was somewhat easier. With the new mammoths, I'm too old to be doing that by myself. I no longer have the studio space, but more importantly, I no longer have the strength or energy to physically do that. Now, that doesn't, I don't feel bad about that because most other artists never do their life size pointing up themselves. They hire professionals to do it. I could never afford to hire professionals. If something was going to get done, I needed to be prepared to do it myself. And I did for years, everything. I did my own point up and I built my own molds.
Mhm.
And then I would travel to the foundry and apply my own patinas.
Mhm.
So mine was always do it personally.
I like that. Yeah.
And it gave me much more creative fulfillment, I think. And it gave me more control, certainly.
Absolutely. Okay.
So where it differed is that this time we did the point up digitally, and we employed modern technology, digital technology, and we did laser scan of my model. But to go from a model that is 1/50th the size of the piece, or a 20th of the size of the piece, which those two tiny ones were, we needed a much bigger model. You can only enlarge it so far before it's like a photograph. You can only enlarge it so far before the resolution starts to fall apart.
That's right. Right.
And
Yeah.
so I needed a very large model. So I flew to Texas, and in the foundry, I set up a studio at the foundry, and I produced a 1/4 scale model maquette. So that was because the mammoth was going to be 4 meters high at the shoulder. I built the scale model 1 meter high at the shoulder. Well, that was a huge sculpture in itself. I worked a solid month, but it allowed me to have something that the museum could come down, look at, and sign off on. Then that model was laser scanned, and that produced a file, an STL file, which spoke to a 3D printer.
Wow.
So they bought brand new printers for the Mammoth project. These are hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment. They bought brand new printers for the Mammoth project, and they produced these 3D prints of the Mammoth. So now I have avoided pointing it up and building the original, and now I've avoided pulling the mold off of it.
Wow.
So that's a huge, huge savings in time and physical effort and money. Just huge. Because I didn't even have to be there for that to happen.
Just to clarify, though, so what is the thing that's being printed? Is it the negative or is it the
It is a
positive?
positive.
Right.
It takes the place of the positive wax pattern, which would have been cast in my production mold.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So now we're not doing lost wax casting. Now it becomes lost print casting. And we
Wow.
call that cast from print.
Okay.
But you have to have an original.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
So you could do away with the
An
original.
original. Now we certainly had an original on these mammoths.
Yeah.
And I only know of one artist who is able to go without any physical anything ever and go directly to bronze with it. And it never is a physical reality. And I only know one artist that's able to do that, and that's your brother.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he's produced all of these massive dinosaurs for that museum in Winton, Queensland.
Yeah, Australian Age of Dinosaurs. Yeah, interesting. Interesting. Well,
So
this
mine was not, mine was something physical. I had study models to work from, to laser scan and to enlarge from. And that is a fairly simple, straight way to go. So that was a huge savings. Now they took that plastic and covered the plastic with the fireproof material, put that in the furnace. The fire burned the plastic. Nobody would be surprised. It was gone. They melted the bronze, poured the bronze. From there on, it's exactly the same process. Now you have a bronze mammoth where once you had a plastic 3D print, which was a reproduction of my clay model. Does that make sense? It's fairly convoluted.
No, I'm following along. I'm following along. I mean, again, for the people listening, if they're not quite familiar with the process of lost wax, what you have is a sacrificial wax that's produced after you mold your original. So then you're producing a sacrificial wax. You cover that in some sort of hard shell, which is like a ceramic type material that has a higher melt point than the bronze, way, way higher than the bronze. And so as you're pouring in molten bronze into this, essentially this plastic or wax copy, as you're pouring that in, the wax or the plastic completely vaporizes, melts away, burns out of that mold, this new ceramic shell, and now that's replaced with hard bronze. You chip away that ceramic shell, now you're left with a bronze. There's a lot of pieces to this process. You're right, but that makes sense to me. I mean, and if anybody's wondering how these sculptures, not only these ones, but other sculptures in the public square, like a Rodin or whatever, ended up there, it's a very similar process, right? This is something that's been around for a long time, though.
Wax bronze has been around since mankind stepped out of the Stone Age.
Wow.
If you look at archaeology, anthropology, we have the Stone Age, the Paleolithic.
Mm-hmm.
You have the Neolithic, the New Stone Age. We were in the New Stone Age up until globally. The Stone Age, the Bronze Age occurs at different points in time in different cultures in different geographic areas. But generally, the first lost wax bronze appears about 7,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it appears in the Middle East, in the Fertile Crescent, in Mesopotamia, about
Yeah.
7,000 years ago.
Right.
The Egyptians used it, the Greeks, everybody had it. It was the Bronze Age. It lasted a long time until the Iron Age, and then the next age was the technological age.
Mm.
So
Wow.
it's pretty simple, but I mean, this is way back there. This marks the point where mankind steps out of just knocking two rocks together.
But, it's interesting, though, that for this being such an old medium, it's still here. Why cast in bronze? Why?
Why casting bronze?
Yeah,
It's a beautiful material.
I'm sure.
It casts things extremely accurately,
Mm-hmm.
and it's virtually permanent in human terms. It's going to last many, many decades, longer than people last.
Mm-hmm.
And could last hundreds of years if it's taken care of at all.
Mm-hmm.
And we have things that are we have bronzes that are over 1,000 years old that have just been completely abused and neglected, and they're still around.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't cost that much more than something, a plastic, a fiberglass, or something else that's not permanent. But I think the most important factor is that it's accurate and very beautiful as a material.
That's right. Yeah, I love it. I love it. And I'm just still in awe looking at these life-size mammoths out the front of the museum. It's just an epic, awesome, awesome sculpture. This, it's interesting though. You were saying something about my brother Travis, who, uh, doesn't need to use an original as part of the process at all. So it can go straight from a digital 3D file to the foundry. Will you adopt that process? And how do you feel about it? Like, won't there be a part of you that misses the actual sculpting something with clay, getting the clay under your fingernails, at the feel of the material? I love digital painting, for instance, but I can't see myself, completely going over to digital and not painting something that scale with oils.
Yeah.
Maybe it's different. I don't know.
No, I don't think it is different. I think I certainly said exactly the same thing, felt
Mm,
the same way about it. And then I share a studio with Travis.
hmm
And so I got to watch it firsthand. And I always have questions about what he's doing and how he's doing it, why he's doing it.
hmm
And as he talked to me about it, I realized that maybe I was just being old fashioned and I needed to embrace that digital technology myself. We've gone part of the way. We're doing
Yeah.
laser scan and producing files from that. And
Right.
so if he's able to do that because he knows about his subject material, knows about his dinosaurs, maybe I could do that with the animals I know about.
hmm
So I have embraced that wholeheartedly. Am I able to do it completely myself now? Absolutely not. But
hmm
I'm learning.
Sure.
And with his help, we're getting there. We just produced the first. Not it's not the first. It's in the first first three sculptures that had nothing physical involved until the bronze appeared. They were completely digital. So this is the third one. So we did a pair of I'm saying this is the third one. I haven't even told you what this one is.
What is this one?
We did a pair of Galapagos tortoises for the North Carolina Zoo, North Carolina Zoo. Then we did a sea turtle for a sea turtle rescue operation on South Padre Island in Texas. And then our most recent one is a life-size bongo antelope from Kenya that was done for the Calgary Zoo. And these pieces were never physical. And I worked side by side with Travis to create those things. And they even look like my sculptural work because I brought the same information and the same feelings and the same statements to the sculpture. And that I'm amazed with. Amazing. So right now I have another endangered species. I'm going to turn the camera around and you're just going to have to say whether I need to move closer or not to zoom in. There is my desktop.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm looking at am I looking at a tapir?
Well, it looks like a tapir. It's actually the beginnings of a piglet.
A piglet.
So
okay.
This sculpture, now I'm going to go, well, you can see the laptop sitting in front of the big screen.
Yes, I can. Yeah.
All right. I'm old enough now that laptop is hurting my eyes. Mm-hmm. But the big screen doesn't.
Okay.
So I've got it wired into that. So this is my magnifying glasses.
Sure.
It brings it up. It reduces my eye strain. Mm-hmm. It allows me to work for several hours, which I was unable to do if I'm just right up against the laptop. That hurts me. So this is one that I've been working on. This is Three Little Pigs. Mm-hmm. Now, when I say Three Little Pigs, that's my name for it. That's the working title.
Okay. They
are the endangered Visayan warty pigs from the Philippine Islands.
Oh, wow.
And they're a highly endangered species. And so I have a male and a female and three little piglets. That's where I got the Three Little Pigs. This is one of the piglets. I'm going to pick up this.
Wow.
So now this, are we in frame?
Yeah, lift it up a little bit for us, Dad. Yeah, perfect. Beautiful.
All right. This you see piglets underneath, I hope.
Yeah, I do. So it's what I'm going to assume is a male and a female with a little troop of piglets between. That's right. Underneath their legs.
Piglets.
Yeah,
we
beautiful.
Put in more, but they're expensive.
Yeah. It's a beautiful sculpture about a foot long, it appears, or slightly under, and just maybe about, I'd say about 10 to 12, maybe 15 centimeters high. But just to give you an idea of scale for the people listening to this, you got to check out the video version. You'd know exactly what we're talking about.
That concept, that composition, I did in 1983.
Right. Of javelinas.
And I did it of javelinas. Those are New World pigs. But the New World pigs and Old World pigs, they're still pigs. Mm-hmm. They still share a lot of behavior. So now when I got a request for endangered Visayan warty pigs, I said, I would really like to see this idea and communicate this situation about pig behavior. And that is the safest place for those piglets. And they're in danger from all sorts of predators. The safest place for those piglets is under the adults. And
Well, I got to say the piglets are cute. I cannot say the same about the adults. These are some
Oh, well,
hideous looking creatures, almost like they're out of that movie Willow or something. That's
yeah.
just they're
Well,
awful
I
looking.
really captured. They're really. I've tried to bring humor into it,
Okay.
and there is a real affection between the mother and her babies.
Right. Right.
And so that's things I'm communicating. Even pigs can be beautiful.
So this is getting back to that
Everything's beautiful in
message.
its own way.
Right. This gets back to that message that we are talking about before, and your insight as an artist with the communication you have between you and what you're creating, and then hopefully that will then speak from art to viewer, and they can have an appreciation for this dynamic that you're setting up.
I hope so.
Got it. Got it.
I'm communicating my experience and my knowledge of the animals.
I love that. Even a Visayan warty pig can be beautiful.
That's
Absolutely
right.
wonderful. Okay, so we're looking at a 3D rendering or 3D modeling program. Now, what is the name of this program that we have here?
Well, this happens to be ZBrush, but there are
ZBrush.
others.
Right. Okay.
That's a three-dimensional model. I
Got it.
have complete control of this model.
Yes.
I can look at it from any angle I wish.
Brilliant. Brilliant. No, it looks great. It's so interesting. It's a program personally that I'm looking forward to learning. It's a steep learning curve, I understand, to get even to this level. But yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's
know.
horrible.
Yeah.
I'm not, I work on this. I find it very satisfying. I still
Hmm.
have clay. I still do my clay models.
Hmm.
Uh, but I'm getting more and more satisfaction out of working on this. But I have something that other people don't have. I have an expert sitting 3 meters away from me every day of the week.
Hmm. Hmm.
So when I run into a little snag about how this program works,
Yeah.
all I have to say is, Travis, give me a hand here. And he
Wonderful.
turns around and says, "No, you're pushing the wrong button, Dad. I told you that before."
So this really does bring up a lot of questions. Exciting to see you embracing the new technology. I I'm curious how you feel about this because this is something that is really I wasn't quite prepared for, not at this level. I'm seeing it all over social media. I ask many of my guests since this has come up about this topic, but AI. Now, AI, it just seems to be this thing that's just taken the internet by storm, and rightfully so. I mean, it's a huge paradigm shift. It's a world altering thing. But for artists and art, there are two-dimensional programs, two-dimensional things, AIs that you can use to create art. I'm just going to say air quotes art by plugging in a text prompt. It spits out this thing. I got my feelings about it, but are you familiar with it? Have you looked into this much? And if so, what is your feeling about this? And yeah, because I'm really curious how you feel. We haven't really spoken much about this before.
Well, let me say to begin with that what I'm doing is not AI at all.
I know, I know. Yeah, for
It's
sure.
natural unintelligence.
You're the
I've got
intelligence behind the process, though. That's the important thing.
definitely a very limited, in my own limited intelligence is driving the program. The program is not driving itself.
Hmm.
Now, a lot of things that are generated are and called AI are not actually AI. It wasn't self-generated.
Hmm.
So just because it's digital doesn't make it AI. So overall, looking at the AI stuff that I see, I'm not very impressed. I'd sum it up by saying it hasn't got any soul yet. It may, in the next few years, we may get there. But right now, it looks pretty naive and amateurish. It's not very sophisticated. I think it might be very shortly.
Okay, I'm gonna send you a link to a video that I think will blow your mind. What and this is old now. At this point, this is old news, and I brought it up in the podcast before, but there's a guy named Marcus, and his last name escapes me at the moment, but he's a very well-known YouTuber, and he did an expose on video from a text prompt. So the idea is that you would plug in your text prompt, and the AI would spit out a video based on your prompt. And some of these videos were indistinguishable from real life. You had to really look very closely to go, oh, hang on, that's slightly off. That's not quite right. So to give you an idea, in this particular video that he made, there was somebody that plugged in a text prompt of point of view sitting just behind a Jeep on a dusty trail with trees, sunlight, or whatever. And then the video that was produced was almost like a GoPro view following a Jeep down a dusty trail with rocks and gravel and bushes and trees and sky and atmosphere and light. And it looked real. If you hadn't have mentioned, hey, this is an AI generated thing, you probably wouldn't have picked it up. There was another one that was a
Generated from scratch, or was it generated from multiple photographs?
no, it was generated from a text prompt. So the prompt was text, they plugged it into the machine, and what was spat back out was video based
How
on
did
those text prompts.
how did the machine know what the back of a Jeep looks like driving down a gravelly, dusty gravel road?
Well, this is how it gets into machine learning and also the large data sets that it's drawing from. And what actually brings up these interesting things about copyright. You know, there's this discussion that AI art actually cannot be copyrighted because what it's doing is it's taking this large grouping of images online. It's drawing from this massive pool of information. So it knows based on what's been uploaded to the internet, what's online currently, it knows to draw from these various things, and that's what it's doing, and then it reassembles it and spits it back out, and what you get was based on your text prompt. This is the way the two-dimensional stuff's working, but it's so weird that it's actually happening now with video. And that the one that really spooked me was a drone shot, like, of a coastal scene, but the waves were slightly off. But if you had told me that that wasn't a real drone flyby of a lighthouse, coastal cliffs, and waves, I wouldn't have picked up on it. But when you really look at it, look for these little things that don't quite line up and make sense, you wouldn't pick up on it. I'm telling you right now, dude, it's freaking spooky. It's spooky what it can do. So the
It
question
may
is,
be spooky,
yeah,
may be spooky, but is it art?
well,
Kind
that's
of
the
like
question. No, no,
where
no.
this conversation began.
Exactly, exactly. So, but it raises an interesting question, and so my personal feeling is there's no such thing as AI art. The minute AI is involved, it's not art. There's no such thing as AI art. End
Well,
of.
now the AI, the artificial intelligence, whatever that is, the computer, the robot that has created the AI art may argue with you about that.
So what?
Uh, you know, so what are you going to do about it? I think that for me at this time, I'm not concerned about it. I mean, I'm happy to embrace digital technology because the alternative to me embracing digital technology is stop doing art because I'm physically too old to do it. Physically, I don't have the strength and the energy to put in the hours that are required to build the clay models.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
still do some of it, but that's just for my own
Hmm.
pleasure.
Hmm.
But I don't have the hours to put into it. I do not want to be out in the garage workshop building molds with
Hmm.
toxic rubber and toxic fiberglass and
Hmm.
catalyst and all of that stuff. I don't want to be doing any of that stuff at my age. It's time to retire.
Hmm.
And if I can just come in and sit down in front of the computer and work 2 or 3 hours and get done as much as I would have gotten done in a week, Well,
Wow.
that gives me the hope that I can continue on and do something creative because I still have a lot of things to say about animals.
Hmm. Hmm.
I still want to communicate what I feel about animals.
So just on the AI thing, sorry, I'm not going to let it go just yet. I recognize that what you're doing is you're utilizing digital as part of the process, but you are still part of the process.
Yes. Yeah. And
And
it's not AI.
no, no, for sure, for sure. What would you say to people that would claim, well, hang on a second, AI is just a tool. You're using digital as a tool. I use AI as a tool. It's just a means to an
Well,
end.
well, you know, it takes you have to art, as we just said, as we said over an hour ago, art gets translated twice
Hmm.
between the artist and his media,
Hmm.
and between the final artwork and the viewer.
Hmm.
So the artist just said, this is artwork. Now, my question is, who's going to write a check for it?
Hmm.
That's up to the viewer.
Yes.
They want to write a check for it? Good. Go ahead. They're free to do whatever they want, buy
Yes.
whatever they want.
Yes. Mm.
I would say it, knowing as difficult as it is to make sales, good luck with that.
I really hope you're enjoying this episode of the Creative Endeavor podcast so far. Just want to take a quick break and let you know about this podcast sponsor, Rosemary & Co. Brushes. Rosemary & Co. have been making the finest quality artist brushes for over 40 years. And again, it's all I use here in the studio. They make brilliant oil painting brushes. Now, you might know that I love to paint in oils. I'm using a wide range of bristle brushes, the Tisch daggers, filberts, flats, rounds, all kinds of brushes. But not only bristle brushes, I'm also using a wide range of synthetics. When I started using Rosemary & Co. brushes, it really opened me up to a whole new world of technique that just wasn't available with the cheap, nasty stuff that I was using before. And I'd use whatever kind of brushes I could get my hands on, and for the most part, I was buying whatever was cost effective. When I saw the quality of these, I was thinking, man, these have got to be really, really expensive. But I was shocked at what value for money they were. Some of the brushes that I have that I've been working with have lasted me years. And you know a good quality brush, when you take care of it, of course, by how it lasts. And some of these brushes that I'm using are several years old. I just love them. Now, you don't have to be an oil painter like me. Maybe acrylics is your thing, or watercolors. They make all kinds of different brushes. I've even heard of makeup artists using these big fluffy brushes to apply makeup. That, of course, is not my thing. I know, it's not. But if that's your thing, check it out. It's pretty cool. Anyway, if you want to get your hands on Rosemary & Co. brushes, all you have to do is go to www.rosemaryandco.com and check them out. And a huge thank you to Rosemary & Co. for sponsoring this episode of The Creative Endeavor. Let's get right back into this conversation with Tom Tischler. Let's talk about business. I want to ask you about the business side of art. You are as old school as it gets. I I
Thanks.
I think about, no, it's a compliment. It really is. Because what my personal philosophy has been so much shaped by my upbringing and a lot of stuff that you've said, but more importantly, what I've seen you do. And what I see you do is building a business on reputation and relationships. And so you're able to not only to demonstrate that you can do the job by the quality of your work, your past body of work, but you seem to have had this ability to build relationships that last a lifetime, where people know who you are within a very small circle of people. In terms of buyers, just take the zoo market for instance, or zoos and museums in the United States. It's a pretty small sliver, but it's something that's kept you employed for decades. And so this is something that has really informed my personal take when it comes to the business side of art is really harnessing and fostering these relationships, thinking outside of the box and not trying to spread out to a mass market with my artwork, but to just try and identify where is the opportunity and tap into that at the best of my ability. So what are some of those lessons that you could share with folks listening, Dad, that you think might help people get the edge? And again, I'll just say, my philosophy, whilst it's shaped by and large from my upbringing, a lot of stuff that I've seen you say and do, um, my whole deal now is taking the old school and the new school and bringing those two halves together. So we've talked a little bit about the new school, and you've told me several times, I can't. We're not going there. I mean, here you are embracing digital technology for your sculptures, but there's a whole bunch of digital marketing and social media and all that stuff that you haven't really done. So here you are, you're thriving, you're selling huge works, you're still going at this stage, you're still going. You produced the biggest sculpture you've ever produced in recent years, just recently here over COVID, right? What are some lessons that you could share with us? If somebody's wanting to just kind of get ahead, take some of those old school lessons, can you share with us a little bit of an insight there as to how we might be able to embrace some of these ideas and push our art careers, our art gig a little bit further along?
That's difficult with, I mean, I know what I went through in the period of time and the culture in which I grew up, and all of that is changing rapidly. So it's difficult to say what it would be like for others. I would categorize myself as a social media denier.
Okay.
Uh, I I not only fail to see the the because I never play to the broader audience. I failed to see any reason to talk to them. I need to find and concentrate my effort, all of my effort, and I have precious little effort to go around. I have to focus on those people who are going to write the checks.
Hmm.
So those are the people I need to reach. I do not reach them through social media.
Hmm.
I don't need to identify them. They're not going to come out of the general population. They've already identified themselves. They are the directors of zoos and museums.
Hmm.
That's the screen I used to separate my market from the rest of the population. And it is a thousandth of a percent of the population.
Hmm.
So marketing to the greater population is not just a waste of time, actually prevents you from being able to do anything else. It becomes a huge waste of time, a huge distraction. You don't have time to mess with them.
Hmm.
So right now we've got about about 500 major zoos. About half of those are accredited zoos. I'm looking at those.
Hmm.
I sell some to zoos that are not quite accredited, and that's because they found some rust on a monkey cage in the back paddock. And, you know, it's not hard, but I mean, it's not hard and fast that I only sell to accredited zoos, but that's who I'm shooting for.
Hmm.
That's my target market. I'm very specific about it. And I pick up some natural history museum work where it overlaps.
So what I'm hearing there is that you are very clear and very definite about this is my market. So I'm going to zero in and focus all of my efforts there. And I'm not going to waste time casting pearls before swine, not to call people swine. That's not what I'm saying, but you know what I mean? You are going to
And I
zero in.
thought that was highly offensive.
But you're gonna focus all of your efforts where it counts. So what can we learn from that? Because I think personally, I think I take too broad of an approach when marketing my work. I think I could zero in a little bit more. And I've recently thought of a couple of strategies. One of them I shared with you just yesterday evening about a strategy of working directly with a hunting outfitter of painting wild game here in New Zealand, of connecting a painting with some people that were interested in that type of work. So, I mean, is there a way? What would you recommend? What are some strategies or suggestions for how to even identify where your market could be?
Well, let's start with that example that you just gave, this one
Okay.
idea. I think that's very much too specific, that you want to identify a market strategy
Hmm.
that's your primary market strategy, and you focus on that to the exclusion of everything else.
Hmm.
You better be accurate about it. Now, if you find that there's another market that's an actual market that's functional that you can approach, well, then set up a strategy for that one. I don't think that the hunting market specifically, that you've narrowed it, it's not just the hunting market,
No, it's not.
which has its own problems.
Right.
And I was involved in the hunting market years ago for many years
Hmm.
and did very well in it.
Hmm.
But hunting is no longer a popular thing now. There's
Well,
huge resistance to it.
hang on. Let me let me jump in here 1 second. There are in this country several introduced species like that aren't endemic to New Zealand. Himalayan tar, for instance, I think that last I heard there was a higher population of Himalayan tar here than in the Himalayas. I could be wrong on that, but
You're right. I
there
think you're right.
there is a ton of Himalayan tar here, which is a particular species of goat. They can do some damage to the natural environment here, but there's also red deer running wild that don't belong here. There's also chamois, which is a particular species, another smaller species that's climbing all over the hills. And what this has done is it's created a market for wealthy hunters, tourists to come here and hunt these animals. And it's very closely managed, but it's something that it's almost doing the environment a bit of a favor because the New Zealand environment is not really equipped to handle these types of animals moving across it. And they're freaking everywhere. And there's no natural predators to keep the populations in check. So hunting is something that actually, creates a bit of a balance here where it's managed. So yes, it's not a popular thing. I get that. The paintings as well that I'm thinking about doing are these animals out there in the environment having a great time, and actually enjoying their bit of freedom. But whilst I personally feel conflicted about the whole hunting thing, I think that I have less of an issue of it here in this country for those reasons. You know what I'm saying? And
I
and
know exactly what you're saying, and I
yeah,
agree. It does have a positive conservation environmental impact to remove as many of them as you can.
there you
Now,
go.
I,
Yeah.
I, it also, and this is not unimportant, tourist hunting in New Zealand is a significant foreign exchange economic consideration.
Mm,
They bring lots of money in.
hmm.
It's
Hmm.
a it is in the sports hunting and fishing industry in New Zealand is a significant income stream.
Hmm. It's massive.
So
Millions
that's
and millions and millions a year. It's
uh,
huge.
I think that, so I am all for that, and I'm all for anything that promotes conservation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I was just looking at the conservation, I would say those tar, those red deer, those chamois, get rid of them tomorrow, call in the gunships
Oh, careful.
and get them off the mountains,
Yeah.
clean it
Yeah.
up,
Yeah.
return it to nature.
Right.
But
Mm.
that costs money. It doesn't make money.
Yeah.
And right
Yeah.
now, we need to think about the economy as well as conservation. We need a
Yeah.
balance.
Yeah.
So I don't have any problem
Yeah.
with that hunting industry. I certainly would support that. Now the question is this the best place for, are these the best subjects you can choose for your painting? Because you have a limited number of paintings that you can do. Is a hybrid red deer or a feral European chamois, which is located in the not even in its natural range, or a Himalayan tar, which, while there are more in New Zealand than there are in the Himalaya, they are not critically endangered.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I would, I question why you would choose those animals. I think there are better choices of animals
Well, I
with
think
better
okay.
stories to say.
There
So I
there
mean, if you want,
I'll tell you. I'll tell you. So basically, my desire to paint these animals, it all comes down to something that I want to do anyway. Like I'm looking at them going, actually, that's a dang cool looking animal. Are there better animals? Well, who's to say? I mean, and having grown up in zoos, all over the place from the United States to Wellington Zoo to then the Perth Zoo as a kid, because when mom left and you remarried a zoo veterinarian, we were taken from one zoo to another, basically. That was a huge part of my growing up. Are there other animals that I am familiar with? Yeah, all kinds. But there's something about this story here and my access to it. There's something really cool about these epic New Zealand landscapes and mountains with one of these critters, climbing on it. I see the image in my head and I can't get it out. There's something there that I'm obsessed with. I'm not painting it for the sale. I want to be clear about that. I'm not painting it just because I think I can sell it. It started off going, whoa, that would be cool. I got to do this. I really want to do this. But the conversation specifically was about marketing. But just to throw that in the mix, I think I see a strategy now to connect painting with buyer. That's what my business is. How do I connect this painting with a buyer? But, seeing as we're talking about the art side of things, I what I'm trying to capture is a moment, and it's a story. It is a story. It's part of this landscape now. It's part of New Zealand. It's part of New Zealand history now that these things came over here and it's impacted and shaped the land. I just want to document that. I think that's really interesting. And another completely different tangent that I want to go in my work, as a storyteller with paintings, is I want to start telling some historical stories about the area where I'm here in right now. Lawrence was going to be the capital of New Zealand. It had a population of 11,000 people back in its heyday, in the gold rush era. It's now down to 475 or thereabouts, and so it's 478 now that Rachel Hugo and myself have moved in. So these are things that I think about. I'm directed and moved to paint exactly what I want to paint. Then the question comes up is, okay, how can I connect this with a buyer? That's always secondary. I don't think, what can I sell? What's popular right now? What could I sell? No, for me, it's about the art first. So I'm just directed by where my heart wants to go. That's it. I think about something, I think that's cool. Now, does anybody have the right to tell you, well, no, that's not cool. You shouldn't think that's cool. As far as I'm concerned, I get to do what I damn well please. Dad.
well, pardon the expression,
Can't tell me what to do.
pardon the expression, but deciding that you're going to paint what you want
Yeah.
and say what you want through your artwork
Yes.
is the trump card. And as I said, that may be an
Yeah.
obnoxious thing to say today, but
Yeah.
that's the most important thing, is that you have something to say and you want to say it.
Yeah.
And that's really important.
Yeah.
If I don't believe that you are tied just to animals that are in introduced invasive species.
Hmm.
You're not.
No.
So I don't have any. If you want to go ahead and do that, that's fine, because you want to do it.
Yeah.
But I think that if you want, if you're looking at it from a business point of view, you need to be very selective about a specific market and study that market and get to know it and provide a product and service to that market. So I started off trying to market, and look, this is 40 years ago, more, 45 years ago. Started off trying to market to the general public through galleries. Well, that didn't work at all. That was terrible. Could not make the math come out on that. I then happened on, and I tried several dead ends. I then happened on to the hunting fraternity, and I did very well with them, but it was a lot of work. I had to go to a lot of conventions.
Hmm.
I spent a lot of time on the road.
Hmm.
And I decided I needed to spend more time with my family, more time at home. And I found that if I did larger work, I could bring in the same amount of money and not go out on the road. So I started with two groups: natural history museums and zoos, because they were interested in the subject I was interested in, which was animals. And then I found that there was a difference in philosophy and personality between zoos and museums, and that zoos were an easier market to work for some strange reason. So I worked on that, found out, decided what I thought was going on with that zoo philosophy and why they were buying so much more of my work than the museums. And I switched over almost exclusively to providing work for zoos and had time to spend with my family.
Hmm.
So we that's what we did. And now I haven't changed my mind on that. And occasionally I get a big natural history museum commission.
Hmm.
That's just occasionally. It's icing on the cake. It's a windfall. It's a winning lotto ticket once in a while.
Hmm.
But for the steady income, bread and butter, zoos are my market. And I do everything I can to provide the best. And this goes for any business, anytime, regardless of your product or whatever. And it's no different for artists. If you want to win, you have to provide the highest possible quality compared to your competition, excuse me. Compared to your competition, you have to provide as high or better quality at a lower price and provide service. You need to take care of them. I just cannot do enough for my clients. I just would bend over backwards to make sure that they're satisfied with their experience of working with me.
Okay, hang on. My business with my paintings is to make them as expensive as possible. I'm not wanting to beat anybody in price. If I was going to beat them on price, my prices would be for hundreds of dollars instead of thousands, tens of thousands for a painting. I won't say on the podcast how much this thing behind me is going to be worth or how much I'm going to sell this for. So let's create a bit of a separation here. Let me ask you to just kind of elaborate on that a little bit more. Is it different for sculpture and what you do compared to your competition?
It,
How do you beat them on price whilst trying to maintain the perceived value of what it is that you do?
all right. The difference comes you have one original painting to sell.
Yes.
You may produce prints,
Yes.
but they are worth so much less. They're just a
Yes.
fraction of the cost of an original,
That's right.
tiny fraction. The difference between your business model and mine is that I'm producing bronze as a limited edition.
So you would offer the mammoths again?
No, I wouldn't. That's a museum sale. That's
Okay.
one of those one-off commissions, and that it's a one-off commission is tied up with the personality and the philosophy of museums. They have
Mhm.
to have something unique.
Understood.
Seems to be a standard mode of operation with them. I haven't sold anything to, well, take that back. I've sold a few zoo animals,
Mhm.
animals produced for the zoo market.
Mhm.
Natural history museums have bought a handful of those.
Mhm. Yes.
Otherwise, natural history museums want one of a kind. I don't do one of a kind
Right.
unless it's mammoths and the project justifies it.
Okay. Right.
So it I'm selling a limited number of prints,
Mhm.
three-dimensional prints,
Mhm.
three-dimensional castings in that limited edition, somewhere between 10 and 100.
Mhm.
Nothing falls outside of that at any scale.
Understood. Yeah.
Most of it's 10 to 50, more of it's 10 to 25. They're very small numbers, even compared to my very small market.
Mm.
If I say that I'm selling to 500 zoos and I have 10 of them, well, that's 5%.
Mhm.
5% of zoos might have that bronze. So they're still very exclusive.
Mhm.
But I do have some competition out there, other people who are selling a similar product. So all products are not the same value. Just because I have a elephant for sale doesn't mean it's worth the same amount of an identically sized elephant from another artist.
Mhm.
That's subjective. You have to make up your own mind whether you think my elephant is more plausible, more realistic, says what you want it to say, or the other one. You have a choice.
Yeah.
But nobody provides more value for money
Mhm.
than I do. That's my business policy. That's my basic philosophy in making sure that I give my clients value for money.
Yeah. Yeah. Right on.
And then I do it with a smile and I bend over backwards to make sure that the entire process of making the purchase is as simple and clean as possible.
There's an idea there as well that when your customer has a positive experience with you, they're more likely to purchase again. And a lot of your business is that repeat business. This was something I remember you saying to me when I first started. It's like you don't want to just stop and have them commission one piece. Their friends, their family are also going to see this piece hanging on their living room wall. you want to create such a positive experience for them that they're likely to either buy or recommend that they come and see you, if somebody else is interested. So, and that also comes down to the work itself, of course, if it's high enough quality and it was, it was well made and looked the part. So this is something that I think is really important. Just want to add that in there. Can
Yeah,
we
I think
circle?
you mentioned that earlier about the personal relationship to your market, to your buyers.
Yes,
And
yes, yeah.
that was really terribly important when I was working with individuals
Hmm.
in the big game hunting fraternity. That personal relationship to those people was enormously important.
Hmm.
They enjoyed saying that, that I know the artist.
Right on.
I know him personally. I collect his work. And I think that this is the best, whatever it is, species, example of this species. They became my client, my patrons
Hmm.
before Patreon. My patrons all went to work to me as my sales force,
Yeah.
recommending my work to their peers who had the money to buy it. That was the secret. And I did that by not, strangely enough, it's one of these counterintuitive things. I did that by never promoting myself. They
Interesting.
would come to me and I would recognize them by face and by name and could recall what their story was and where they thought they were going to go next. And if they had some something personal for me to remember, I could remember all of that for about 2,500 people.
That's pretty cool. Edward de Bono.
Yeah, but it was Edward de Bono. I mean, I studied de Bono hard.
Yeah.
And before that, I studied, even when I was a kid, I was studying Harry Lorraine
Hmm.
and systems for recovering deep seated memories.
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm still very interested in that. And I think it helps with not just the marketing, it helps with the artwork.
There was a guy on an artist in residency. I had done this artist in residency kind of spread out nearly over, well, close to 8 years. And so it'd been many, many years since I saw this individual. And he came up and he introduced himself. And I said, "Oh, of course I remember you, Mr. So and so." I won't give his name. And
Yeah, yeah.
I said, "Of course I remember you." And then at the end of the residency, he came up to me, shook my hand. He said, "I'm really impressed with you." I said, "Well, why?" He said, "It's not for your work or anything. It's just he said, you remembered my name." I'm like, "Yeah, of course." It's you, you know? And he's like, "No, but you remembered my name." That had such an impact on this individual that, it stayed with him. And I didn't really have it plugged in at the time, but I was like, "Ah, there's something here, to this." Not as a way to manipulate people, but it does. I think it is important to care enough about the people that are interested in your work, the people that you're interfacing with, that you kind of personalize it in that way. And I think that
Yeah.
genuine connection actually ends up serving you well in years to come.
One of the, a quotation that I used actually came from a comedian. It might have been, I mean, this is so much older than your audience. A comedian like Jack Benny, and it might have been
Dude,
Jack Benny that
dude, a
said,
lot of my audience is older than you, man. Come on.
"Oh, they can't be that old. I'm just barely hanging on."
You'd be surprised.
So
We
this
have
guy
everybody
said
listening to this.
he this was part of a skit, and it was
Yeah.
the punchline was, uh, I I don't remember names very well,
Hmm.
names or faces,
Hmm.
but I never forget a check. Well, I took that to heart and I built a system around that statement.
Okay.
And that was, if somebody wrote me a check, I started a J. Edgar Hoover file on them immediately.
Amazing. Yeah.
And one of my favorite philosophers, environmental biologist is who's on YouTube. His name is Daniel Dennett. Daniel, and he he's an environmental neurologist, and he said every time that you take an idea and interact with that idea, whether you read it or hear it or say it or see it, and you're conscious of it, your brain makes another copy.
Mhm.
So you're able to recover, you reinforce those neural networks, those synapses that you use. So before I would go to conventions, I'd pull my file out with everybody who had ever thought anything, and I would go through and sort of remember them.
Mm.
Oh, I remember Mrs. So and so, she bought a whatever.
Mhm.
And when I got to the show, she was either there or she wasn't.
Mhm.
If she wasn't, didn't matter. But the people who did walk up to me, I was able to say, so pleased to see you again, John. You know, how's that going? What, you were doing this. How did that work out? You know, and talk about what they were doing. And I had a blatantly transparent but highly effective system that I used for these people. I I would never say, "Oh, have you seen my new piece or anything?" They were going to get around to looking at it. They were interested.
Mhm.
I'd say, "Look, I'm just starting out. I'm just a young guy starting out trying to make a business in art, and that's pretty damn difficult. And I just wondered if you could share some pearls of wisdom with me. How did you make it?
Mm.
What was your secret? How did you make it?"
Mm.
And I'd ask that, and they would tell me their story. They were always never had anyone who didn't tell me, didn't actually want to share how they had made a success out of themselves.
Yeah.
And so I asked those stories, and I listened hard.
Right on, man. Right
And
on.
if you listen and you pay attention and you tell yourself at that moment, remember this is going to be important.
Mhm.
Well, it was important from 2 points of view. One, their stories actually had good information about being successful. And secondly, remembering them
Mhm.
was so much easier when I knew their personal story.
There's a book that I think after this, I'm going to have to go back and listen to it again while I'm painting here in the studio by Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And there was one line in there that the sweetest word in the language to the listener is their own name. You know, when you recall their name or you're actually you're interested in them. You're not busy trying to tell them what you're up to, what you're doing, but it's about them. You know what I mean? It shows you
That's
actually
right.
care about them. And again, I just want to say, like, this is not a
But you
way to
can't fake
manipulate.
that.
You can't fake that. No, that's what I'm saying.
They have to be important to you. I'm telling
Yes,
you,
yes.
those people, those people became lifelong friends.
So yeah.
They came by and they spent money with me
Mhm.
year after year after year.
Yeah. Can I add something else there? So the way I have to position this in my mind, if ever I get it twisted or if I'm not thinking about it quite right, is expressing gratitude for them. So I make that connection between this person's writing a check or, giving me a deposit here or commissioned a painting. They actually make my entire life possible. Now I take that so personally because that's what makes me able to then put food on the table for my son, my wife, and pay the mortgage and all that stuff. I'm insanely grateful to have that opportunity. So then I'm able to express genuine love for these people. So So I love that, Dad. That's
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. And if you didn't have these people, your patrons,
hmm
supporting you,
yes.
then you'd have to bloody go out and get a real job.
I've been fired from pretty much every job I've had.
I didn't know
So
you'd ever had one.
I haven't been employed formally since I was 21, Dad. You know that.
So what were you back in the day?
Back in the day, I flipped burgers, I made coffee, I very for a brief period of time pulled beers, and then the last job I had was working in a giant refrigeration unit the size of an aircraft hangar, shifting cartons of milk from one side of this giant fridge to the other. The joke was, "What was your job in that big fridge?" I said, "Well, every time they opened the door, I turned the light on."
Right, right. That's good. I like that.
But I came home from
All of
that
those,
smelling like cheese. It was awful.
all of those examples that you just listed
Yeah.
were not actually jobs, they were
Mhm.
education. That's where you learned you didn't want to do that for the rest of your life.
Yeah, yeah,
It certainly
yeah.
will make you appreciate doing artwork and getting paid for it a lot more.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that is true. That is
But
very
you and
true.
I are both extremely fortunate to be in that position.
So what do we do then? Like, okay, so let's circle back to this idea because there will be people listening to it going, okay, well, whether it's somebody who a high income high net worth individual who wants to commission a painting or buy something from inventory, or a zoo or a museum commissioning a bronze sculpture, it's like, well, I have paintings of this, or I have sculptures of that, or my ceramics are like this. How what would you say, what would be a strategy for somebody to be able to identify a market? And let me just add, before you jump in here and answer that, I recall you giving me a lesson. This is something that I've repeated very recently to my students on the academy when we're talking about marketing ourselves as artists, that you will identify them by where they live, where they work, where they play. So maybe I'd love to hear you riff on this because I know you've got a lot to add here. Because it's pretty much your idea, dude. I ripped it off. Sorry about that.
Well, if they're buying your paintings or my bronzes,
Yeah.
then they're really not working. They may own the company,
hmm
but somebody else works for them and turns the crank and does the hard work. So now we're limited. We're looking at the possibility of trying to identify potential clients either by where they live or where they play. So where they live might be an exclusive neighborhood in a city. Every city has the top line. If they're in there, then they've got the money to buy your luxury item.
Yes. Yeah.
There are also recreational categories that would identify them as having money. And the question is choosing a recreational category that relates closely with your chosen subject. So let's just say you say, all right, well, those people that are big game trophy fishermen, they have to have a lot of money to charter those big boats and go out and just take just them out marlin fishing or whatever.
hmm
There's big
hmm
money in that.
hmm
Well, there is.
That's right.
How do you reach that particular market? You need to be specific about getting in there and reaching it. If you're looking, you find some other way to identify a particular group of people and then tailor your marketing strategy to that particular group. Now, I have left that marketing, identifying the money and the marketing, I have gotten out of that business. I have delegated that to my employees. My employees are a handful of zoo directors.
Hmm.
They know about their community.
Hmm.
They know who is likely to donate money to the museum. And when grandma passes away, they know who is likely to provide a bronze for the zoo as a dedication and memorial to their past grandma.
Yep.
That's the way my business works now.
Interesting.
Zoos do not buy artwork for themselves. Wealthy people within the community buy the artwork for the museum. And
That,
I
yeah.
mean, or the zoo.
Hmm.
And I would prefer that they do that because I would like to see my artwork that the public would have access to it. I don't want it to be elitist and very I've lost the word right now. Alzheimer's is
Exclusive.
setting in
Yeah,
again.
yeah. Like, yeah, but elitist is that exclusive elitist? Yeah.
Exclusivity is what
Yeah.
I'm talking
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
there. I don't want it to be so exclusive and so forth. I want the public to have access to it. And here I'm making it possible for a person who has money to share that with their entire community. I make the sale, I get the sale, and I also get all of the community to benefit from their interaction with my artwork.
Hmm.
And it always comes down to promoting conservation for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I feel good about my marketing strategy. I feel good about it from an ethical point of view.
Absolutely.
And you were saying very much the same thing about reasons why you felt good ethically about uh, doing a painting of a bloody Himalayan tar.
Oh, dude. Yeah, I can't wait.
Oh,
I
just
can't wait. It's gonna be epic.
all right.
Yeah.
I'm ready. I want to see it.
Yeah. So well, I'm about to start. I'm actually starting the design phase this week for that
Do
piece.
you know the Latin name for tar?
No.
Well, did you look them up on Wikipedia, the very first stop
Oh,
of everybody who's intelligent? I'll tell you before you get there, it's hemitragus.
wait, give me a second. Himalayan tar, Wikipedia. Hemitragus. Hemitragus. Gymlahicus. Gymlahicus. Hemitragus gymlahicus. It's fantastic. That's fantastic. Um, they are they're an extraordinary animal. I'm actually as we're talking, I'm cycling through images of your bronzes, and I've got a confession. The composition that I have in my head, I pulled up this picture of the goats of the world. You remember the series that you did, which is just absolutely stunning. That's the painting. The animal's like, oh, far out. That's where the image that's embedded in my mind of this thing coming around the precipice and just sitting there. It's so much like the ibex that I have. I've got a casting of your ibex, but there's some beautiful, um, amazing goats here. What's the one with the big spiral horn, Dad? Again, remind me, that starts with an
A
M.
markhor, that's
Markhor.
Falconeri.
Yeah. So there's some
But
of
if
these.
you
Yeah.
study them, if you love them,
Mm.
you'll know all of their anatomy and you'll know their scientific names and you'll know their conservation status.
Well, I'll
You'll
get there.
know their range. You'll know what's historically important about them.
Yeah.
It's you need to know whereof you speak. So you just need
Sure.
to become a an expert on hemitragus.
I'll get there. I love that though. I love that you care so much about the subject that you not only are just creating this epic piece of work, but you become so intimately familiar with the animal. Again, you have to know if wherever you speak. I find that insanely inspiring, and it causes me to want to go to that extra level. Go that extra mile, put that effort in. If anything's worthwhile, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing to the best of your ability, isn't it?
I agree.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Look, I've really enjoyed this conversation, Dad. That's how easily you and I can fill up 2 hours or thereabouts. Is there anything else that you would like to throw into the mix here? It's been wonderful having you back on the podcast. I'm sure people are going to get a lot out of this and find it interesting and food for thought. I certainly have. But is there anything else that you would like to share with us?
At this point, I think that anything else any other subject we get into, that's another 2 hour conversation. So I think
Okay.
for this one, that's enough. I'd like to leave it on reinforcing that idea
Mhm.
that for you to get enthusiastic about your subject, you have
Mhm.
to know something about it.
I
So
like that.
study it every way you can. Read about it, learn about every aspect of it. Doing it, if you're looking for animals, do a Bing image search, build yourself a file, decide but nothing, absolutely nothing is going to take the place of personal experience.
Mhm.
So painting animals that you haven't seen in the wild, or at least alive in captivity, you're asking an awful lot.
Okay.
How do you know how they behave? And I'm just very fortunate to have spent a lifetime visiting every major animal concentration in the world. That's hard to do today. I'm not finished yet. I've got a few more trips left, and they'll all produce bronzes. So
Amazing.
know whereof you speak.
Mhm.
I'd leave it at that.
Well, this has been fun. Dad, thank you for being on the Creative Endeavor podcast.
So pleased to be here. Try not to let it be another 10 years before you invite me back.
Will do. Well, I really hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Creative Endeavor podcast. A huge shout out, thank you to my father, Tom Tischler, for joining me. You could find my dad's work by Googling his name, Tom Tischler, and just plug that into any search engine, pull up some images, and you'll see all kinds of different examples of his work. Now, of course, this episode was pretty heavy on the visuals, and there is a video version of that. So if you're curious and you want to see my father and myself talking to each other in our studios, and also some of the visuals that my editor has cut into this episode, then you can find that right now on Tisch Academy. Simply visit tisch.academy, and for just $5 a month, you can catch every episode of the Creative Endeavor podcast, and also you can have access to hundreds of hours of painting video content, as well as critiques. And also for my higher tier, I go live from the studio every single week. So if that sounds like you, then check that out by visiting tisch.academy. Now you'll find that Dad's been pretty busy, pretty prolific over his career. There's a lot of images that are going to come up on Google, but he does also have a website, tomtischler.com. You can find several examples of his work there. Now, I'm just going to say that his website is in desperate need of an update, but there's some good quality images on there. But hopefully we get an update to that website very soon. It really needs one with some nice high-res JPEGs on there for us to just really appreciate how much work goes into these sculptures. Well, I really hope that you've enjoyed this episode, and if you did, then please do me a huge favor. and leave me a rating or a review on whatever audio platform you're listening on. It makes a huge difference to the show and helps push this out there to more and more people. And also, if you enjoyed this episode, then please share it on your social media. You have no idea how powerful that is. I really appreciate that effort of just getting this out there to as many people as possible. Thank you so much for taking the time. Well, this has been super fun. I hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as I've enjoyed sharing it with you. I'll see you again very soon in another episode of The Creative Endeavor.